So welcome back, all of you. It's a pleasure to welcome Professor Sri Anand to speak to us today on diffuse matter in space. He's my friend and colleague from IUCAA who has worked extensively on diffuse matter in space, particularly quasar absorption lines, ionizing backgrounds at high redshifts, outflow from QSOs, variations of fundamental constants using absorption lines, modeling of the intergalactic medium, broad emission line regions, you name it. And he's one of the best persons to talk to us about diffuse matter in space. And we're very fortunate to have him this year. So thanks very much, Anand, for making the time. And we look forward to your talk. Thanks.
I'll start my talk on diffuse matter in space. I request you to stop me if you are not following or if I'm going too fast or whatever. So in today and tomorrow morning, we will be at the same slot, we will be discussing about diffuse matter in space. What is the basic idea here? Because whenever you are introduced to astronomy, people talk about stars, galaxies, and then you will say various other things, clusters of galaxies and things like that. But these are basically shining objects because there is a source in the middle of these objects which generate energy, because of which they are luminous. They are luminous in certain part of the spectrum, right? So the diffuse matter, if you want to broadly classify, diffuse matter may be the material which is either producing radiation or it is its presence has been felt through its interactions with the background radiation. So my idea of these next two lectures is to motivate you that diffuse matter in space is not something absolutely irrelevant for the formation of stars or formation of galaxies or whatever you are thinking about. So there is a kind of connection between what happens to stars and what happens to the gas in between stars, and similarly what happens to galaxies and what happens to the matter in between galaxies. So this is the idea we will try to develop, and without going into too much technical thing, I will try to convey that this will give you the basic physics which relates to the galaxy formation or star formation. Without going into much detail, let's start with a simple picture where this is the picture everybody shows when you do astronomy, introduction to astronomy. Basically, you consider a source which is sort of a source which is far away from us and very luminous, so that you can see it. So one of the things astronomers do is to take the spectrum of any object you see in the sky to do various things with it, because spectrum gives you more information than a simple picture, right? So let's see, you can envisage 2-3 scenarios while you are doing spectroscopy of a distant source. One is that there is a source and you just take the spectrum of the source and you are directly taking light coming from that object. Only thing which happens is that the light goes in all direction. So as it comes towards you, the flux sort of reduces, right, by 1/r². That's it. But the shape of the spectrum will be preserved, and whatever information you have in the spectrum emitted here will be received here with a diluted spectrum. This is what is known as direct spectroscopy of a distant object. You can also envisage a situation where there is a distant object. This object is far away from us, because of which what happened when I try to take the spectrum of this object, the light from the source might have encountered something between us and the source itself. Okay, this kind of situation you can think of. Then what happens is that if the material which is present in this intervening gas, if it can interact with the light which is coming from this source, it will start modifying the light itself. Okay, so modification means like you can add or you can subtract, right? When you add something to already spectrum which is coming from background, you call it as emission. When you do something from, when you subtract something from the photons which are coming from the background source, we call it as absorption. So in a mathematical term, I don't know whether you are introduced, but you can simply say, you can ask this question: if there is a material which is present, if intensity at a frequency nu is I nu, what is the kind of reduction in the intensity happens when a light travels through a distance ds. So this we can write down as di nu by ds is some, as we said, that some subtraction as well as some emission. That's what you think it should happen. So subtraction, we can say that subtraction means like it is absorption. Absorption is proportional to number of atoms present in a system. And also for a given number of atoms, if you send more photons, the probability that you will absorb photon will be higher, right? A given photon will be higher. So directly, the subtraction or absorption is directly proportional to the intensity of the incident radiation and property of the material itself. For example, if it is a pure glass which doesn't interact with photons in an atomic level, at that level of this thing, so that it can produce absorption or emission, you just have some shift in the wavelength, it's a shift in the phase, but you will see the same spectrum, right? When it comes through this. Whereas if it goes through a gas of hydrogen or some other molecules, molecular gas, you will find that the imprints can be there. In a simple term, this you can, if you integrate this equation, you will get to an equation of this form. I nu, which is the intensity of the radiation you will receive, will be proportional to the incident radiation multiplied by a decaying factor e to the minus tau nu. Tau nu is nothing but the property of the material integrated over the length over which the photon is going through it. It is what is known as optical depth. So in a simple case, if you put a gas in between you and the source, the gas will suffer some amount of absorption. That can be characterized by this quantity. This is the incident radiation intensity multiplied by the exponential of this quantity called tau nu. Tau nu has two principal physical quantities. One is the property of matter, which is called kappa nu, which is absorption coefficient. You integrate the absorption coefficient over the length of the cloud, right? That is known as optical depth. So this term gives you an idea that what is the amount of radiation you will be losing going through the cloud. Of course, we can also, every place there could be some emission in the same frequency. Then you will find this is the correction factor you have to apply. So you do this integral again. What one is doing is that like basically I'm trying to calculate I nu by integrating over ds, right? That's what I have done. And you will find that the term you will get here, S nu is nothing but the local emission J nu divided by the absorption coefficient. Okay. So this is just a standard equation. I just want to introduce you the standard equation. And even without going into that, we can envisage few interesting situations. I will explain it now. For example, let's take an atom which has two levels. If the electron is in the ground state when it is quiet, photon comes. If the photon has the correct frequency, this electron in the ground state will go to the excited state, which means this photon will be lost, and that energy is now being used to excite an electron. So this is what is known as absorption. So basically, you can see when a photon comes towards you, it is gone now. Okay. Now, what happens to this electron which is sitting there? The electron which is sitting in the upper level, it cannot live there forever because it's not a natural location for its natural location will be ground state. So what it will do, it will come back to the ground state so that this photon which is emitted can go in any direction. So that is the kind of thing you have to visualize. There is one photon which is coming towards you. It has a clear direction. It excites an electron so that there is no photon going in the other direction. When the electron comes down, it emits the same electron. That means there is no photon lost in the system, but this newly emitted photon will go in all directions. This is like a scattering. You can think of like a scattering experiment. Photon comes in this direction. When it is emitted, it will go in all directions. So it is obvious when absorption is happening, if you are looking towards the background source, you will find that there will be dark space because you will be missing photons. This is what is known as absorption line. Of course, there will be emission. Some amount of emission is occurring in this direction also. But what will be the probability that a photon will come in this direction? It will be 1 by 4 pi steradian, right? Because you can think of some sort of a d theta by 4 pi steradian. That will be the probability of finding a photon emitted coming towards you. So that is much smaller compared to whatever amount of photons you are losing here. So you will always see a nice kind of absorption when you have a background source with a cloud. Suppose if you look at only this cloud, what happens? You don't have anything behind in this direction. So whatever you are seeing is what is emitted by this cloud. So that will be of low intensity, but you will detect them very well. So it is very interesting. You can do absorption line spectroscopy, for which you need a background source. You are actually probing the photons, what happens to the photons along a narrow path of photons between you and the object. But you can also look at the object without any background source, where you will see emission. But these two are actually connected. They are driven by the same physical mechanism. If nothing is there, you will see a straight spectrum. Okay. So it's, why am I introducing this very quickly? Because I understand that you will have some radioactive transport happening in the course, or there is a discussion with Dipankar, I noticed. There you will go in much more depth. But I just want to motivate you. When you find there is an absorption spectrum, it means that there is an emitted photon in some other direction. Okay, that you have to remember. The second thing you have to remember is, whenever you see an absorption, electron is going from ground state to an excited state. Whenever you see an emission, electron is jumping from excited state to a ground state. Okay, this is basic level thing. But now we'll do pure astronomy. We'll look at some observations. We'll try to infer various things about this observation. So first spectrum I'm showing. This is a spectrum of a quasar, which is what is known as 1553 plus 113. And you can see the wavelengths. Wavelengths we are probing is in the ultraviolet range. So definitely we have not observed this source from any ground-based experiment. This is a spectrum taken with Hubble Space Telescope. The idea of showing this spectrum is to introduce you what is known as interstellar medium. Okay. So what happens is that whenever you look at any object in the sky, the medium which you are, there is an omnipresent medium between any object which is extragalactic, means just outside our solar neighborhood or whatever, or extragalactic means outside our galaxy itself. This sightline, these photons will pass through the material in our galaxy itself, right? So how do you know there is material in our galaxy? That means this gas is nearly at rest with respect to us, nearly I say. So if this gas is present, if it is follow this kind of physical thing, then you will see it in absorption. So this is this kind of spectrum taken from any extragalactic objects, one of the example I have shown. And you see several tick marks being made here. These are absorption produced by our own galaxy in the spectrum of a distant object. In fact, it is obvious if you look at a patch of the sky and look at various distant objects, if you take spectrum of them, you will find a consistent set of absorption occurring at the same wavelength in all the spectrum, right? All the spectra you have in hand. So these are definitely produced by some material coexisting within our galaxy, right? So this is one of the indications, the fact that any object you observe, any spectrum you take of an object within our galaxy which is far away from us, or an external object from outside our galaxy, you will find these signatures of absorption. So this, first of all, it proves that since it is towards all objects, it proves that there is a medium which is sort of filling the gap between stars more or less continuously. So this is what is the indication of first thing you have to know is that there is a medium, there is a gas which will produce absorption in our thing. So it goes by the name interstellar medium. This is the first thing we learn. Second thing we learned from this picture is that a simple introduction to some notations. You look at carbon, this absorption, I noticed, I noted it as C1. If you say C1, means that this absorption is produced by neutral carbon. What I mean is that all electrons are completely intact in the carbon atom. Carbon atom is neutral. If that happens, the absorption will occur in this wavelength. So you see that carbon has several energy levels. Transitions can occur. We will go into slightly more detail soon. So you will see this absorption. So first thing we notice is that the external object shows some absorption, which proves that there is an interstellar medium. Second thing we are seeing is that if I take a species like carbon, I'm taking carbon, I see absorption produced by neutral carbon. I also see C2 means like one electron removed carbon. There is an absorption produced by carbon, but this is carbon atom only, but it has one electron removed. There is also a case where carbon 4 means there are 3 electrons removed. It's very interesting. First thing you notice is that there is gas. Second thing you are noticing is that you are seeing a same atom in different phases. Different phases means like you have you have neutral carbon, you have ionized carbon in different form, 1 electron removed, 2 electron removed, 3 electron removed, etc. So what does it mean? Is that first thing you say medium between stars, there is medium between stars. Second thing is that it seems that medium between stars is not completely neutral or completely ionized. It seems that it is a mixture of gas which is ionized as well as neutral, right? Ionized at different levels. So immediately you will ask a question: what is required to keep a atom neutral? The question is that nothing is required. You produce a neutral atom, leave it without doing anything to it, it will remain neutral. So that is a good thing. So what is required to ionize a particular atom? For example, if you take hydrogen atom, what is required? You require energy of 13.6 electron volt, so that this electron can be thrown out of can be removed out of the hydrogen atom. Similarly, if you look at carbon, if you want to remove 1 electron, you need some energy. If you want to remove 2 electron, you need some energy. If you want to remove 3 electron, you need some energy. More the ionization state of an atom, you need more energy to remove the electrons out of this. So the second thing you are learning, first thing you learned is that there is material between stars. Second thing you learned is that the material between star is not neutral, it is ionized. And the common sense tells you that if you want to produce ionization, you need some mechanism which exchange energy, which inject energies into this atom and remove this electron out of this atom. Okay, just seeing the spectrum, what are the conclusions you can draw? The conclusion you will draw is that gas in different forms of ionizations, right? And you need some energy. This gas has to have some energy source which will remove this electron out of this. Okay, so this is basic kind of thing. We start with this spectrum, right? Of course, is this the only tracer? You can do this experiment in a bit more way, differently. For example, if there is a background source, this is the experiment we are doing. You have this this gas which is present, and you are observing this star, and you are getting the spectrum. Yeah. Okay, I see some raised hand.
So can I ask now?
Yeah, you can ask me.
Sir, how are these like C4? How is it stable in the medium, or is it not stable?
We'll come to it. Can you tell me what do you mean by stable?
As in, like, how does it remain in that ionized state and does not recombine again as soon as possible?
Yeah. The fact that you are observing them. So this is the equation you have to. That also tells you something about that time scale over which things can remain in a given ionizing state, right? So it's not like see. Basically, what happens is that there are equilibria between the rate at which you are ionizing an atom and rate at which you are recombining. You can maintain any level of ionization by adjusting these rates. I think you can wait for some time when we reach there.
Okay.
Okay, so the point I was trying to make is that when people were observing different targets, you can also think of a situation, because basically when you do absorption line study, as I mentioned, the sight line goes through the cloud and you are probing only a small cylinder of gas in the cloud. The cloud in your longitudinal direction can be much, in the transverse direction can be much bigger, right? So what happens is that if you use a GMRT kind of a telescope, you may be able to probe the full emission coming from the gas itself, right? Because it's a big beam, and you are looking at a very big object. All emitted regions, because you can even imagine there is no background sources in this place. Only one place there is background. In all other sight lines you can think of, which will connect to the GMRT telescope and the cloud, this will be like you have a situation where you are probing local emission, so you can detect the clouds in emission also. Here is an example of the same quasar sight line where I have now plotted in a quantity called relative velocity. I fixed the laboratory wavelength, and I can now calculate the Doppler velocity of each absorbing frequency and plot it in velocity scale. C delta lambda by lambda will give you, it's like Doppler shift, right? So that will make sure that all material will be aligned in the velocity instead of going in the wavelength space. And this is the kind of thing you will see very often in astronomy publications, where if you find different ions, they align it in velocity so that we know like what happens here. And I purposely chose C1, C2, and C4 because you see that you can have a feel of what kind of regions they are there. And the same quasar is being observed with GMRT, and you see that this is the hydrogen which is associated with the same gas which we are probing in absorption. Okay, so that just to say that I just introduced 21 centimeter, but you have studied in detail, or you will be studying in detail. So I will assume that you understand this, just to show that neutral hydrogen is there, neutral carbon is there, there is singly ionized carbon, and there is something called star, we work a fine structure line, which we will see in the next slide. So basically, now let me just reiterate. You have gas which is ionized. The question is that you need energy to ionize. Of course, you also not only you ionize the gas, you have to keep it ionized exactly like in the state which you are observing for periods of million years or whatever, because it's not 1 or 2 days. Okay. What more you can tell about an atom? We will go a little bit deeper. Suppose if you look at the carbon atom, this is the neutral carbon's energy level diagram. We will focus mainly on the ground state. Okay, whatever we call ground state in a loose term actually splits into several what you call fine structure states. In particular for neutral carbon, what happens is that it splits into 3 ground states. So why am I showing this thing? Actually, you can think of electrons being here, here, or here. There are finite probability that it can be in the absolute ground state, first excited state of fine structure level, or second excited state of fine structure level. Anywhere it can be. Again, what it tells us is that we need some energy or to some source which will put electrons in these different levels. So what is the observational consequence of presence of these kind of levels is that if electron is present here and if it produces absorption, it will follow the selection rule. It will go to appropriate energy level here, and that absorption will occur at some frequency. If the same atom has an electron at an excited state, the absorption will occur at some other frequency. So the same ground state can reveal the fine structure levels by series of absorptions which will occur at different wavelengths or frequencies. Okay, here is one of the example. This is the ground state of, if you look at ground state of neutral carbon, this is the strongest absorption you see is the ground state. And this absorption, whatever I have noted, is from the excited state. So again, I will just, so please just grab this, whatever I'm telling, I will connect all these dots at some stage. So then you will understand what it is, right? So first thing I introduce is the simple atomic absorption, where we loosely say neutral, singly ionized, doubly ionized and all. But you can go a little more deeper. You take a neutral atom itself can come from ground state, first excited, second excited, because this ground, first excited, these are in what we call as the fine structure levels. Of course, this 21 centimeter which was introduced to you is the next level, which is known as hyperfine structure. Okay, so that is the thing you have to remember. And I just give in these slides the typical fine structure levels and what kind of energy required for them. So this for most common thing like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, the most abundant elements, and you can see what is the energy which is required to in Kelvin, right, in thermal units, because you can understand if collisions dominate, what kind of temperature is needed in the gas so that they will be populated, and what frequency in which wavelength in which these transitions will occur, and what frequency in which this transition can be detected. Okay, this is the kind of simple picture you have to. So what I wanted to tell you is that we can actually do very high quality atomic spectroscopy, where you will be resolving not only atom, not only ion, you will be going into the inner details of what we call as fine structure splitting in a given atom of our interest. Of course, there are 2 things. One is that we study about the laboratory kind of thing, right? I have a gas, I have an incident radiation. Now I calculate what is the amount of absorption the photons will suffer and do all these things. But what happens in the reality? What happens in the reality is shown here. For example, we are sitting in the middle, and imagine there is a source in our this is some sort of a artistic impression of our galaxy. You take a source which is here, or along this direction there is a source. then what happens is that it hits different parts of the gas. It's not like one gas element you are talking about. So this is problem in astrophysics. If gas is still, okay, no relative motion between you and the absorbing gas, then you don't have any idea of the distances. Like the distance can be very large, right? There is no real idea of distances involved because you just see one absorption. The rest wavelength of the absorption is fixed by quantum mechanics. All gas will produce absorption in the same place, and that's it, right? You will not know when you find an absorption, and you will not know whether the absorption coming from one place or it is spread over a tube. You cannot distinguish whether it's a thin sheet or a tube. You cannot distinguish. Fortunately, in several interesting astrophysical situations, if you take a line of sight towards any object, there is relative motion introduced by various physical quantities, which makes the Doppler shift of photon absorbed at different locations being very different. This is absolutely essential. If this was not there, we would not have done anything in cosmology. We would not have done anything in astrophysics, which is related to dark matter, dark energy, or whatever we can think of. This is happening because there are relative motion between objects. Relative motions are driven by various things, and we have a question last time, the last talk, whether there is a what you call escape velocity related to galaxies. Of course, this is there. Escape velocity or any location. Only difference between escape velocity in Earth and in the galaxy is that in Earth is a point mass. So we calculate escape velocity assuming there is a Kepler kind of problem, right? Point mass problem. Whereas if you are dealing with any object, you will say find the center of mass and you can calculate what is the kind of velocity this potential will introduce on this. Here is an example of gas in a gravitational potential of a galaxy like ours. So basically you see several absorption lines. You don't see one absorption line. You see several absorption lines. Now we have plotted again in some velocity scale. What we have done is that we know, if you assume that this is 21 centimeter, we know what is the rest wavelength of this line. Any absorption occur, you can find out what is the Doppler velocity width, and that is the Doppler velocity shift, and that is the quantity which we have in the x-axis. Y-axis is what is known as brightness temperature. You can think of like a flux. Okay, it's basically, I am sure like you are introduced to brightness temperature now, but for our purpose, we will assume this is flux or whatever. This is in emission, this is in absorption, and it states the following, that any direction you look in our galaxy, whatever we said that the simple medium, first we saw there is medium, it is omnipresent everywhere, it is ionized, neutral and all. But we also notice that the medium need not be uniformly distributed gas. It is actually in the form of clumps. The clump is a generic term. Clump need not mean that clouds are like that. Any density inhomogeneity, you will see in inhomogeneity means like if you go through the gas, suddenly density goes up, comes down, goes up, comes down. Wherever there is a density enhancement, you will call it as a clump. When there is a density, lower density, we may call it as void or whatever, low dense region, under dense regions or whatever, right? So clearly you can see when we go into slightly more detail, we notice that we have absorptions. Absorption lines are not completely smoothly distributed. They are sort of clumps, which is very important for us to probe structures, because this allows you to, if you go to high enough resolution, you will be able to actually see what kind of materials which are present and what kind of clumps which are present. Again, let's start from the beginning. I need somehow gas to be present in the galaxy. That gas will be kept now in different sort of ionized form. We said we need energy. Not only energy, we need continuous mechanism which keeps the gas ionized at a particular level always. Now we are saying that this gas is not uniform. It can have clumps, and something has to produce this clump. The clump has to be formed. Okay. The second thing we'll say is that in our atmosphere, we can say, oh, I know clouds are forming. A cloud disappear also, right? So somehow we have to talk about formation of the clumps, stability of the clump, what keep the clumps stable, right? Is there an equation which will tell me that how many clumps I can have in my medium which I'm considering, and what is creating this clump, how long this clump can survive. So this is the point I wanted to introduce, and we have now slowly we are getting into the interstellar medium physics. We have now understood that materials will be, how the material will be distributed, how we are going to probe, when we probe what we are inferring. Okay. So now I will go slightly more into this. Till now we have been a bit vague about hydrogen and all. So if you take hydrogen atom, just as an example, hydrogen can exist in various forms, a purely atomic form or a molecular form. Okay. So atomic form is what gives rise to 21 centimeter, or we can also look at what is known as Lyman alpha absorption, which is basically in the UV, Lyman series absorptions we can see. So that will be in UV range, and 21 centimeter will be in the radio range. So if neutral atom is present, you can use radio telescopes or UV telescope to probe them. But there is also possible that two hydrogen atoms can actually join and form what is known as molecular hydrogen. Okay, so this introduces you to the idea of this medium need not be purely atomic, it can be also molecular. Once you have molecular, we ran into interesting scenarios. So let's just look at molecular hydrogen. What is the difference between a neutral single hydrogen atom and a molecular hydrogen? Right, single hydrogen atom means you are thinking of a electrostatic potential of proton, in which one electron is sort of, you are thinking of electron in electrostatic potential. You look at the energy levels in this. When you have molecular hydrogen, you are actually thinking of two hydrogen atoms joining. So at a basic level, you will have electronic transitions, because this is hydrogen atom, this is hydrogen atom. In an overlapping potential, you can think of like electronic transitions will be there, exactly like the way you can think of. But when you put two atoms together, you can also think of other modes of excitations, right? Because two atoms means they are tied to, you can think of like a dumbbell. Dumbbell can have excitations in the form of they can rotate, right? This is what is known as a rotational excitation. And you can also vibrate. This is known as vibrational excitation. So basically, when you go to molecules, there are two things becomes very interesting for us. One thing is that what is required to make a region only atomic, and how do you make this region with atomic hydrogen going into molecular hydrogen? That means we have to understand the requirement for chemical reactions, which will keep the gas either in a molecular form or in an atomic form, which we have to decide. So definitely when one studies molecular species, you are talking about the chemistry. Okay, I just vaguely put these things, right? The second thing which is interesting is that given the fact, forget about, I don't care how molecular hydrogen is formed, given the fact molecular hydrogen is there, it is amazing, because hydrogen atom, we are saying Lyman series, Balmer series, where the transition can occur. When you go to molecular hydrogen, you will have a lot more transition possibilities are there, because you are not talking about electrons going into different things. You are also talking about rotational quantization of this molecule, as well as excitations due to vibrations. So here is an example. So you saw that when we look at 21 centimeter, there is a single line produced by hydrogen atom in 21 centimeter. And here is an example of Lyman alpha absorption. But when you go to UV range, you will have several lines produced by hydrogen atom, same set of hydrogen atom, because you have the possibility of, you can go from 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4 kind of transition, which is known as Lyman alpha, beta, gamma, delta. You would have studied in simple spectroscopy courses, is Lyman series. Optical range as Balmer series, Pachon, Brackett, Fund. You would have studied all these series. So that will give you one set of lines. But look at how the molecular lines will be. Molecular lines are much more crazier. You see them, this is one gas. The all set of absorption line which you see is produced by one set of gas. This different branches, whatever you are seeing, is depending upon what ground state of vibration you are there, and different levels of rotations, and these transitions are occurring between different electronic levels. So this is very intriguing, but very interesting. What does it mean is that you can take a table of, you go and look at the laboratory spectroscopy of molecular hydrogen. You can take a table of lines which you are going to detect when you take spectrum of this any object where molecule is present between you and that object. Then you can now go and find out how many molecular hydrogen is in the ground rotational state, first excited state, second excited state, etc. in the rotational level. You can also say that how they distributed in terms of vibration. So what is the point? Point is that like the distributions of particles in different levels require different energies. This is what we started with. Okay. If you take a hydrogen atom, we are saying 10 electron volt between 1s and 2s. right? To a state, we require 10 electrons. If you want to take some transition between 1s to 2p state or 1 to 2 transition, you are talking of 10 electron volts required, right? Whereas here, when you go to fine structure excitations or going to rotational excitations, we are talking of very small energy. That means if you need some energy to excite them, it is not much. So we will invert the problem. Whenever you find the transition, we know that this much energy is present in this region. So that is the way we will look at it. So just to summarize, when you detect molecular hydrogen, you will do chemistry. Second thing is that you will use atomic signatures to probe the local region itself. So I will go into a bit more detail sometime, but you are with me till now, I suppose, right? So now we can also ask, you detect molecules, you detect atomic gas, ionized atomic gas, neutral atomic gas, molecular gas. Is there any connection between them? Are they random or is there anything that we can do by statistical analysis? This is what is plotted here. What is plotted here is the total hydrogen. Total hydrogen means like amount of hydrogen in the neutral form plus amount of hydrogen in the molecular form. That gives me total hydrogen present between me and stars. Each point is a one observation, one star observations. This is the integrated number of particles between me and that star. And this is obtained by with different telescopes, and this is why these have different colors. What is plotted here is that what is the fraction of atoms, what is the fraction of this hydrogen which remains in the molecular form. This is what we said 2NH2, because each H2 will have 2 hydrogen atoms. This is the number of hydrogen molecule divided by total number of hydrogen atoms. So this gives you fractional hydrogen. If it is 1, means it is completely molecular. If it is 10 to the minus 4, 10 to the minus 5, means there is a little bit of molecule is there, but mostly it is neutral. So just let's focus on these points, and there are 2 vertical lines. We will take one of them. I'll consider this vertical line for our discussion. So you just look at the curve. This is a logarithmic of this. So if the number is minus 2, means like 1 part in 100 is molecular. You can say purely it is atomic gas. So it's clear when the total amount of hydrogen increases, you find that the amount of the fraction of gas remain, which is in molecular form, increases with the total number of hydrogen atom I have. So clearly, it seems that there is something you have to, if there are more hydrogen atom, the probability that you will convert that atoms into molecule is high. And there seems to be in our interstellar medium, in our galaxy, there seems to be some kind of interesting thing, because if you take this is the latest, if you take all the colors, the latest thing is basically from FUSE. This is another satellite which is used, which operated in the UV regime. And you can take this line, for example, it is around 20.25 or something like that. You can think of like 210 to the 20. If you are here, most of the time, the neutral fraction you are measuring is less than 1 part in 100. Whereas if you go here, you see that it is between, it is close to 10% is the median value, right? So it seems, at least this is a consensus in the community. It seems that when the hydrogen amount of hydrogen is along our line of sight is 2 into 10 to the 20 centimeter minus 2, you find that it is highly probable that you will have molecules in this gas. If it is less than that, it will be purely atomic. This is purely observational signature. Okay. So we also know that there is some condition which operates, which is related to total number of hydrogen atom, which will make this gas into molecular form. Of course, we detect molecules of different forms, not only molecular hydrogen, we detect very complex molecules. And this plot is just to demonstrate that there is nice correlation between them. So for example, if you take a CH molecule and plot against the molecular hydrogen, you find a strong correlation. That means like when there is more molecule in molecular hydrogen, you end up having other molecules also in a more abundant way. Okay, it's just to show that first thing is that more hydrogen, you will have more hydrogen molecule. If you have more hydrogen molecule, you will have more other molecules also, carbon monoxide or cyanogen or whatever you can think of. So these are the quantities which we have to understand. Okay, so now let me pause and just to recollect what we have said, because I think this is 2 lectures. I cannot go into depth in these things, but I want to make sure that you carry this and you can go back and read. First thing is that interstellar medium detection is through absorption lines, and the absorption lines have different ions. So first question we are asking, what is ionizing the gas? Second thing is that why these ions remain in a particular number. What decides that? Having said that, we can think of ionization means particles colliding with each other or some radiation which is present in somewhere. I will introduce you this thing either today or tomorrow, but we will talk about it. Then we have some indications of various energy requirements. Either I can use 21 centimeter line, or I can use fine structure excitations of atoms. I can use rotational level excitations of molecules. They are all detected. Okay, this is up to this is very nice. The next thing you will ask is that, like, okay, can I make a connection between all the molecules? It seems that observationally molecules are detected not only from hydrogen atom, we're also detecting molecules made of carbon and other things. It's very useful because this is what we need in interstellar medium if you want to make life at some stage. So it is very interesting. We have them. And now we can ask this question. This gas is not luminous. This gas is not luminous means this gas is low density. You are not seeing it on its own light. You are seeing it in absorption. It is most likely that it cannot form stars, right? Because it cannot form nuclear reactions. Because to form nuclear reaction, you need high temperature. You also need higher densities. Then you will ask the question, how come here is the gas? How come it has carbon, nitrogen, oxygen? Where from this gas got carbon, nitrogen, oxygen? Because in our understanding, you produce hydrogen and little bit of light elements in the Big Bang, but most of the heavier elements which we know in our life, they cannot be produced from Big Bang. They have to be produced in the regions where stars are there. Okay, so now what we are seeing, not only in stars, the region between stars, you have enriched elements, right? You are seeing elements like magnesium, silicon, and all. How do they get there? So it immediately tells you that only thing I know is forming stars. So this medium has something to do with stars. Otherwise, it will not have these elements which we are detecting. Okay. So then people said that, okay, let's look at these things. What kind of elements we have, and let's plot. Only thing I know elemental abundance is my sun. So you take sun, you take spectrum, you can calculate how many carbon atoms are there, how many hydrogen atoms are there, different atoms, and you can make a table. This is the table which you can use for what is known as solar composition, and it is done in a unit of some strange unit. 12 means a logarithmic unit. 12 means the amount of hydrogen is, if amount of hydrogen is 12, amount of helium will be 11, means it's a 1:10. 10% of the material will be helium. And here, if I want to calculate these numbers, so this is the abundance of different elements which are measured in logarithmic unit. I have given the definition here in our sun. What you can do is that you look at, you observe different stars, you count the number of carbon atoms. What you will do, you will count neutral atoms, ionized atom, you combine all of them, calculate what is the total amount of carbon atom in this region, what is the total amount of hydrogen in this region. You can define this quantity called metallicity, which is the basic ratio of element to hydrogen atom in any region scaled with respect to the same from sun. So this is what is plotted here. What is plotted here is that what is known as condensation temperature versus what is known as metallicity here. So you take different elements. Suppose if I take carbon, I calculate what is the ratio of carbon I measure here, what is the number of carbon I measure here divided by number of hydrogen atom. That gives me my y-axis. Then I ask this question, if I take carbon, I take in a gaseous form at some temperature, I let it cool, that I keep reducing the temperature, when it will go from gaseous phase into either liquid or into solid phase. We can ask this question. That temperature is what is known as condensation temperature. And people plot condensation temperature versus metallicity. This is the plot here. And you can clearly see that when the condensation temperatures are very small, the elemental abundance is, if it is 1, means that the abundance in the gas which you are probing is very close to the abundance you see in sun. Okay, 1 means exactly abundance ratio you see in sun. First thing observationally noticed is that if you look at interstellar medium, the element which cools down or elements which condense at higher temperature seem to be very less compared to hydrogen atom in the medium, in any medium which is probing. compared to elements which condense at low temperature. This you keep in mind. There is a physics. That means there is a physics driven by temperature here. Temperature drives some physics of this plot. Okay. So we have to now understand what will be the physics, what is the connection. The way I am narrating the story is that it's not going, you don't jump into a question, you wait, okay? We will come to this, but you remember this correlation. It seems that if an element condenses at higher temperature, its abundance seems to be less compared to its own abundance in sun, okay? Because sun temperature is much higher than the temperature we have plotted here. If you go to sun, all these elements will remain in gaseous form because it's even in photosphere, right? So now it is also been pointed out by various people that, see, for example, you have learned that you can measure temperature of the gas by 21 centimeter spin temperature, right? You measure spin temperature, that will give you kinetic temperature. People then mapped our galaxy, right? You do this exercise in all over the place. Then they found one of the things which just came out of this exercise is that there are some regions which are cooler compared to some other regions which are hotter. So people sort of distinguish them in cooler regions and hotter regions, and then you can do this plot, which we have done in a random place, to a very systematic way. You say that you consider regions where the measured temperatures are lower and plot this element at abundances. And you also consider regions where the gas temperatures are higher and plotted these regions. Again, the same thing I have plotted. It means like this, plotted from this. Sorry. Okay, we have time. So the x-axis is the how much deviation the elemental abundance with respect to sun. Y-axis is that, and x-axis is the element. For example, take sulfur. Sulfur seems to be, and I have plotted, so I indicated, so I have shown the dotted ones are very hot gas, and the cooler, this with a circle with a dot, are the cold gas. Okay, let's follow only these two. You can imagine that this is the region where the measurements are done, where the hot gas temperature is higher. Here the gas temperature is lower. And one thing which is completely evident, that when you consider gas temperature is lower, that any species you take, nickel or iron or anything, the deviation with respect to sun is much higher. So if this is related to some physics, so there are two things we notice. One is that low temperature regions suffer, the heavier atoms in the low temperature region suffer more deviation with respect to sun. This astronomers interpret in this, you can interpret in two ways. One thing you can say is that the solar kind of abundance is universal. Everywhere you produce same amount of all these elements with respect to hydrogen. Different region, you measure them differently because of the physical conditions, because you remove most of this gas into solid form or liquid form, so that it will not produce absorption. Only gas will produce absorption. If all the atoms are in gas, you would have accounted for all of them. If they have gone into some other phase, you will not detect them. If it is a solid, you will not detect them. Okay. So then you can say the first assumption I made is that uniform distribution of metals, different region, the difference I observe is dominated by the physics related to deviating away from the gas phase itself. So this is what is known as dust depletion, dust formation. You can also do other way around. You can say that no, I don't form galaxies. When I form this interstellar medium, I didn't form uniformly. I made it into random. Some locations it is different, more different compared to sun. In some other location, it is very closer to sun. But the correlation related to temperature is saying that something more to this story. So there are two options. One is that inhomogeneous production of elements and in the interstellar, inhomogeneous distribution of element in the interstellar medium, or homogeneous distribution followed by differential depletion in the interstellar medium. So the question is that how do you make the distinction? So you can ask me, like, how do you know that whether there is a dust extinction or where there is something else? We know this from presence of dust. We can infer very easily, because that we will just see it will redden the background source. This is, we know that's how a setting or rising sun in a dusty region is yellow or orange, right? That's the same reason. If dust is present, dust will be associated with gas. We will see them in dust means also it's a solid state particle. Can it produce absorption, which will indicate that there are some grains which are present. Dust also scatter light. Can you look at the scattered light? And dust can get heated to some temperature. It can emit thermal emission. So these are the 4 things one can actually see when dust is present between you and the object. Do you see them? So I will skip this thing. I may come to in the next lecture. I think you'll just go into one of these things. Is that this is the picture which is taken with the space telescopes, and you see that this is BVI image, and the star number density of star is not uniform in this figure, and you suddenly see there is a dark patch where there are no stars. So either you say that there are no stars here, or you can say that there are same number of stars, background stars here, but for some reason there is something which is obscuring the star. How do you know this option is there? So when this region is observed with infrared can have a high probability of going through the dusty region, dust scattering, because that's why we use red color lamps for stopping the cars or vehicles. The same principle, if you go to redder wavelengths, you beginning to see things which are not much scattered, and immediately this demonstrate that the number of stars which you see here is not very different from rest of the region, but the suppression is mainly due to something related to dust. So the dust extinction has been well documented. We know that there are dark clouds which prevent UV optical light to come towards you. That means like the first option that the dust is present. The other way of inverting the problem is now we know that there is condensation of material, a gas occurring in our interstellar medium, so that there is nothing wrong in assuming that some regions have more solid particle compared to some other region. Of course, you also see scattered thing. This is Pleiades. You would have seen this. This is visible to us. And in optical and in infrared, you see that there is too much scattered light, and it once again proves that if you have some region of stars surrounded by dust, this scattering can take place. So the scattered light will come to you when you go to appropriate wavelengths. Okay. So this is another interesting example. This is one of those regions. So you have seen, first thing you see that dust can extinguish, means like it can remove objects which from visible to you. We also seen that you can see this indication that the light is diverted in other directions, right? Now we will see the example of if you have some gas which is present, if you have a background star, if there is some gas which is present and this gas has solid state particle means like you can excite excitations in the solids. That means that solids can also absorb. The certain frequency range, solids can produce absorption lines, and these in general terms in astrophysics they go by the name diffuse interstellar bands. And here is an example. For example, you look at this is HD 2044824. This is a star. HD is a catalog name. Here is a star which was observed for several times, right? You can see several years, 2001, 2003, kind of 2001, 2003, and 2001 in different months, which has been observed, right? So I have marked 2 things. One is that you can several absorption line. So when you observe a star, you can have absorption produced by the stellar photosphere itself. You can have absorption produced by the material in between us and the star. What will be good is that if you have a binary star or something, if one star is sort of very quiet, another star is moving around, then you will see that if that star is very bright and if it has some Doppler shift which can be measured in the form of absorption line, then you will get into some interesting situation. Here is an example. This star has some radial motion. That means this is going around something, because of which these lines, the Doppler shift will be there. That you can see here, right? You can see this absorption, which I marked as Fe3. It doesn't come at the same wavelength. It just moves this way. So which means that this is coming from star. So this absorption we know, but there is other set of absorption which you see here, which are clearly stable, right? Because it doesn't go anywhere else. So this absorption level remain anchored to some place. So this we understand as the absorption produced by the interstellar medium, because interstellar medium is not having any relative, it's very still as far as we are concerned with respect to the star, right? So you can look at the spectrum, you can identify whatever Doppler shifting lines versus the lines which are stable, and then that will give an idea of which is interstellar medium and which is this thing. And people can identify these lines, but these lines are not, you can detect these lines, but these lines are not related to any object which you see in our laboratory. That is the big point. So we find bands of absorption, not only towards one star, and I can look at neighboring stars like that, right? Because they probe the same, whatever you call interstellar medium, you find these absorption lines. These are known as diffuse interstellar bands, and these are mostly unidentified. Several of these things are not identified. We don't know what is causing it, but we have some idea. This could be like benzene rings. That's why they are related, whether they can be related to polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So again, you will ask me, if you are logically thinking, you will ask me, oh, you are seeing it in absorption. That means that if I take a wide range of region and look at it, will I see it in emission? Of course, people have seen the same kind of transitions, corresponding transitions of, for example, if you take a CH or various molecular bands, you can identify where these lines are. After identifying all these lines, there are some emission lines which are detected consistently in different regions, which again will be related to some kind of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons which are seen. So what am I trying to tell you is that we have indications of dust in these four forms we were thinking about. We are detecting them. We are detecting them in the fact that they are extinguishing objects which are, they are actually preventing you from seeing object behind. They are scattering light, scattered light is seen. They are producing absorption. So you know that what kind of material these dust particles are. Okay. So we will be able to map the dust which is present. So what is dust? Dust by name is generic, but what is dust could be a complex molecule which has been formed from whatever atomic gas we have in this medium. Okay. So study of all these things, gory detail, is what is known as interstellar medium. I will not be, I'm just giving you a preview to what you do in the interstellar medium studies. I will give you references and all if you have questions. Maybe I'll stop here. If you have any question, you can ask me now. And what I'm going to do in subsequent classes is to just connect this small scale physics which we have done to large scale physics of stars. Now we have to connect them to stars. So I'll stop here and take your questions if there are any.
Sir, what is this reddening of starlight, and how does that show the presence of dust particles?
I just told you. See, you know. Can you tell me why sun looks red or orange in the evening?
Because it has to travel larger distance. I mean, it suffers scattering in the atmosphere, so most of the wavelengths are absorbed, and what we see is the red part of the spectrum.
The same thing here. So that means if I put a completely blue goggle, in sun you will see, but for example, for relative terms, the sun is red means you are not receiving blue light, right?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Same thing happens here. In the left side, I have given an image obtained in visible band. You don't see anything in the visible band. And the right hand side is the infrared, you can think of in red. So you see in the is a dark patch here, whereas here you are seeing within the dark patch, you have stars, right?
Yes, sir.
The same physics. So the fact that how much stars are missing, or the same star, you can ask how blue it is. That will allow you to calculate like what you said, it is traveling through the atmosphere, right? Same physics you can use here and calculate what is the amount of dust or amount of scattering happening in the atmosphere or in the gas in between you and that. This is what I meant by extinction. You can calculate.
Okay. Yeah, got it, sir.
Sir, so can you expand upon, we discussed the stability of ionic clouds, right? How do we tell about that?
No, so it's very simple. If you take a cloud means what? There is no boundary, right? So you will ask me, if I am defining a cloud, you will say that, can you define a boundary, right? How do you define a boundary to a cloud or something? The stability comes from that. If stability means I define some shape or I define some boundary to a region, and that should not change, correct?
Yes, sir.
So suppose if you have a gas, means like it will have some density and it will have some temperature, correct? So it will have some pressure, local pressure will be there. The tendency of this pressure, I'm giving you in a simple term, tendency of the pressure is to make the gas expand outwards, okay? So one of the requirement of stability means the gas should not expand outwards. So in the case of star, what you do, you use the self-gravity to prevent it from expanding. So gravity gives the stability there, okay? If you want to give stability to the gas, we have to somehow introduce an inward force, which will oppose this outgoing pressure. So there are different mechanisms which are given. So this is the question you are asking: how
Yes,
I am
sir.
going to keep the size of the gas remain intact in the same way?
But
This
this
is the
gas
question.
also consists of ions of different charges. So we discussed that, right?
Yeah,
How do
you
these ions
take
behave?
no, that's what that means. Pressure. That's why I use the correct term. Pressure means that you have to consider all possible interaction between atoms and molecules and ions and calculate what is the pressure. So that is
Okay.
the average density, average kinetic energy of individual species in that region. See, pressure is given, pressure is related to, right, average kinetic energy, right?
Yes, sir.
So that is what is it. The physics wise, that is what you will do. You will calculate average kinetic energy of all the ions. All should, if they are coexisting, the systemic energy is same, right? Kinetic energy. That's the point. You will deal with electrostatic interaction, you will deal with collisions, you will solve them. That's a bit complicated. That's why I give a simple thing saying that correct physics term to use is pressure. Gas pressure has to be balanced by something else. Okay. Or other way of thinking is that you can do like our atmosphere. There is no stability in the sense that gas forms. So sometimes you have clouds, sometimes you have clear sky. So you can also have this transient. You form sometime and they disappear. Okay. Here the time scale of that transient phenomena. Transient means like that kind of phenomena can be few hours. Suppose you imagine that you slow down the whole process, and if it takes 10 to the 6 years, in our lifetime it appears as if stable, but this region may be going like our atmosphere. Some days it is there, clouds are there, some days they are not there. Only thing is the day here will be 10 to the 7 years or something like that. You get the physics, or you want me to do a bit more?
Yes, sir. Understood. Thank you.
I'm giving in a vague, very simple pedagogical way. Anything more? If not now, you can think about questions for tomorrow, and I will ask you in the beginning. If you have anything, you can ask them.